introduction. So if you could each tell me some about what you're working on.
Sure. I'm Bill Sonneborn, the Global Director for Disruptive Technology at the IFC, which is part of the World Bank Group. Oversee a portfolio of about $8.5 billion. Fastest growing part of it is in deep tech.
Hi, good morning. My name is Oded. I'm the CEO and co-founder of 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷, the only and first fusion energy company in Israel, trying to solve one of the biggest problems that we have. I think the keynote speaker was alluding to energy as a key issue to be solved. And that's what I've been doing after I retired after 30 years of Israeli Navy career, retired after being an admiral, and said, okay, what's the next dream I need to do? And that's where I'm right now. And looking forward to this discussion. It's definitely deep tech.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Alex Eleftheriadis. I'm a partner at Big Pie Ventures. Big Pie is an early stage venture capital fund operating here in Greece in deep tech. Our first fund was 47 million euros. The second one just closed with support from Hellenic Development Bank for investments. It's 50 million euros, growing probably 75. Same focus on deep tech investments. And we invest in companies that are not Greek. They can be anywhere in the world, but they have to have presence in Greece, meaning the development has to be, part of the development has to be in Greece. And before Big Pie, I was a professor of electrical engineering at Columbia University in New York for many years, 10 years. And then I was a co-founder of a startup called Video, which was in the video conferencing stage. And then after the company was sold, then I moved on the investment side.
Great. So, I mean, you've all spent your careers in deep tech. What attracted you to deep tech in the first place? And feel free to just jump in.
I mean, for me, it's the fundamental thing of kind of what our mission is, which is a double P&L. So it's generate profits with a purpose. And so when you think of some of the biggest challenges, whether it's climate change, whether it's food security, whether it's health, particularly in the focus that we have, which is emerging markets, the 130th poorest countries in the planet, the only way we're going to solve some of these big challenges was with big leaps in technology innovation. And so we have to think broadly about how we're going to get to the 1.5 degrees Celsius, how we're going to solve the additional 2 billion people and the food supply necessary to get them. And that's not going to come with, backing companies like Facebook. It's going to be new adventures and
So
higher risky.
mission.
Exactly.
Mission.
Exactly.
Yeah. For me, it's something that I was thinking about for many years in terms of, okay, where do you do the biggest impact in the sense of solving big problems? And after background in electrical engineering, after studying at Harvard Kennedy School on a global scale, and after being many years in submarines and then going to look at the globe, literally from living a periscope to looking at the globe from the Kennedy School global perspective, I saw that energy is at the core of many of the problems. And when you look at that, and you understand that those problems have deep-rooted technology challenges, I said, okay, we need to go in that. And when I did retire some 7 years ago, I got into the ecosystem, the amazing, innovative, entrepreneurial ecosystem of Israel, and said, okay, we need to bring this ecosystem on stage, on the work to do this and help push it an inch further. And really maybe solve it. And the solution that we have in 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷 is a small fusion device, 10 to 20 megawatts, something that we think really can be distributed and democratize energy. And I think that's an important important path where we need to go with energy.
So again, mission
driven.
Yeah.
Totally mission driven.
Great.
Well, I grew up in technology. I mean, I started off as a student, then a PhD student in the United States, and then as a professor. So I grew up from the technology side. And of course, for me, it was a way to be creative, to be intellectually challenged. It was a lot of fun. The venturing aspect of it was revealed to me, if you wish, when I was in the States, because growing up in Greece, there was very little, entrepreneurial activity, certainly not deep tech, certainly not in the way that we understand it today. It was a gradual process, and then, I was in touch with state of the art in digital video compression communication, which was very fascinating, and I got to know what a startup is, how companies are structured. So eventually I got to create my own, which again was a great learning exercise. And I think I saw the huge value it has both for the individual, for the society. I mean, look at all the progress we use. So for me, I wanted to stay within that space. And that's why my move to the investment side was a way to stay within that space and contribute in a way that would not necessarily require me to be the CEO or the founder anymore. Okay? Even though I have to say this is not entirely true, because I do dabble with some things, but that's another discussion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing I noticed in the 3D printing world is suddenly it became discovered and everyone said, wow, 3D printing. And what struck me was it had been around for so many years. Our company was founded in 1994, but the industry had existed already for 10 years before our company. And so it struck me how long these things take to really hit the big markets. I'm curious to know your thoughts, your experiences with how long this takes.
I mean, fusion can take forever, so I'll let him talk about that. It's always been 10 years away ever since I was 18. So,
It's going to change.
but a number of these things just take a long period of gestation. It starts with really interesting research in a university, typically. And then that innovation in the lab then now has to think about how it has a commercial application. Then you actually need people that are entrepreneurs with more of a business mindset to take on that technology and think about the commercialization, and then start to scale up the business, bring down the cost curve to let the technology actually be adopted. A great example is a Romanian business we invested in called UiPath. It's the world leader in robotic process automation. It was founded in 2005 on a shoestring budget of $300,000. That lasted the team of 8 working out of an apartment for about 10 years from the University of Bucharest. And then all of a sudden they finally hit on the desktop version of RPA, and the game was over. They went from raising capital at a 30 million valuation to a 35 billion valuation in 7 years.
Amazing.
Which is so if you're stick with it, there's always hopefully a rainbow that you find at the end of the day.
Yeah, I totally agree. Perseverance is extremely important. And on fusion, as you said, I think today we're standing on the shoulders of 80 years of experience and knowledge and experimental results that we can today harvest with new technology and some new ideas, not necessarily from academia, but from outside of the field sometimes. And I think there we have a serious possibility of accelerating. And I really think acceleration of this kind of deep tech solutions is extremely important. Things do take a long time, but when you do have convergence of new technologies, like for example high temperature superconductors, like power electronics that are extremely stronger, much more controlled, we can converge things that didn't exist in the last decades to really push this forward. In terms of fusion, the need is so big, and so we see the private sector coming in, because it took a long time when it was mainly academic. Mm-hmm. This decade, it's not only academic. And what the beauty of the private sector, and you guys are in it, is that when you come in, you push on across the board many options and many possibilities, betting and hedging in a sense, but at the same time enabling to move faster. And therefore solutions will emerge. And I believe that's exactly what we're going to see in this decade.
Yeah, I guess space is an example of where this happened, right? The private sector came in and essentially pushed everything at a much bigger pace. But look, for us, we are an early stage fund, and normally funds have a duration of 10 years, right? And the issue with deep tech is that it might take a long time, for the team to basically perfect whatever it is that they're building, and they're finding its way in the market. So it's always a challenge and a question for us when we look at a particular investment, which we may like, we may believe, right? But the time aspect comes into play, and I think it's a pity in the sense that it could push you to shy away from an investment just because you think that it might take too long to mature. But it's a fact, and there are also competing investments. Completely software-driven investment, that the capability to move much faster. Right. Okay, so when you're looking at both, you're like, what should I do? Okay, so it's a challenge.
Yeah, the gross margins also.
Gross margins as well, exactly. People hear hardware and like, oh, hardware. Okay, yes, thank you. It's the other door. It's
I saw that. Reluctant. Bill, do you work with VCs to find technologies?
Yes, we do. So a good example is we're in partnership with the 𝐸𝐺𝐻, which is the commercialization venture arm from MIT, Harvard, University of Cal. And so through them, we're always looking for deep tech companies that they're backing that have an application that could really solve a big challenge in emerging markets. A good example of one that we sourced through the 𝐸𝐺𝐻 is Boston Metal, which is invented through MIT's labs a way to manufacture steel with zero emissions. The real challenge for the technology is it needs to operate in an environment that the grid is basically 100% renewable power source. The right application for that technology is in Brazil, not in Boston. And so we're investing with them to build their first operating commercial plant in Brazil as we speak.
Oh, that's really interesting. Oded, sometimes startups come with a problem looking for a solution. In other cases, it's a solution looking for a problem. Tell me about the early history of the company. Did you start with a technology and then you were looking for an application?
So we didn't start with technology or an application. We understood the energy is a huge problem, and I understood that fusion can be a serious solution, and we need to really accelerate it. And what I did was found some brilliant physicists in Israel that were sitting on some ideas, some 20 years working and thinking, simulating by themselves. And we connected and I said, okay, if what you're saying is true and possible, let's start moving and doing experiments. And I think the market is there. It's the biggest market. The question is not the market or the need. The question is, can we really solve this? And I think one of the strong values that we brought with the technology that we have, some of it obviously invented and created, is that it's a small system. What we're working on is a small system. A small system, unlike the huge fusion solutions, has the ability to fast iterate and experiment. No simulation in fusion can really give you the whole picture. You do separate simulations, then nature doesn't lie. You need to do experiments. And therefore, the pace in which you can do experiments can increase and really bring you faster to a solution, and therefore to the market. And that's where we're right now, continually changing the prototypes very quickly and checking everything and validating our assumptions, our simulations, etc. And so I think we came in a convergence of that.
Okay, great. Alex, the Greek universities have a long history of doing terrific research, which gets published and sits, in people's drawers. How are you accessing that sort of rich source of potential products to commercialize?
It's a very good point. In fact, if you look at all the major hubs of innovation around the world, there is always sort of very high quality educational institutions behind them, MIT being obviously one of them. So, and in fact, when we started 𝐵IG, I was certainly hoping to see a lot of sort of deals that would come, from research institutions and universities. Unfortunately, the culture here was not so amenable to sort of connecting, let's say, with the market. So thankfully, we do have a number of projects which originated from Greek universities, especially in Crete. But I'm hoping to see many more. I think it takes a lot of education. In other words, students have to be aware of the possibilities available to them after they graduate, especially PhDs, especially postdocs, which are the most likely people to lead, commercialization efforts. Professors here in Greece are less likely to be willing to leave their jobs. I guess that's the same in the US as well, but here it's even less likely. So you have to look at these people as the potential leaders for the startups that might be created. So I think we have a long way to go. The good news is that Greece has a very strong diaspora. So a lot like me, a lot of people left Greece, they went abroad to study, to work. Some of them came back, became professors. So we have excellent, high quality faculty that came from MIT, from Harvard, from Columbia, from Berkeley. Okay, that definitely rejuvenates, the system here, and also the diaspora that stays abroad and becomes founders. In fact, a lot of the companies we founded are diaspora Greeks who were in universities and they started companies there. So I think we are way behind, and I'm looking at Israel, I'm, smiling, but anyway, so we're way behind. But I think, what we're doing here, all the different funds, and I think ours specifically, because we are deep tech, definitely helps in that direction. And one of my partners, 𝐼𝐳𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐸, is also very active with the government to help create policies and change laws that basically would make it even easier for people to take sabbaticals, leaves of absence, to be engaged, in entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I mean, MIT is best in class and has really paved the road for how that can be done.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you, and feel free to chime in any order, is there a role for non-technical founders in a deep tech company?
Oh,
Yes. A great example, I'm going to use one from Israel. So I was in Tel Aviv a couple months ago, and I met some brilliant scientists that had thought about this climate change challenge and had developed a reflective material that they could send into space, and it would act as a thermostat. So they could basically control that nowhere on the planet Earth would the temperature get above 25 degrees Celsius at any time. Now, great, interesting technology, but I said, who's going to pay for that? They didn't have an answer. They need someone I told them, you need to find someone that has business skills and commercial ability to leverage your technology to actually think of a business model where you can charge people for that. It's a perfect example.
I think team is extremely important, and I think the right team has to have the right the different minds working together on this. Luckily, I did enjoy MIT Sloan back a few years ago, and really to hone entrepreneurial ideas and not only scientific and I would say technical knowledge, but eventually we need to have that kind of combination, as you say. In Israel, there's an ecosystem, and you saw it, you just alluded to it, there's an ecosystem of creating a lot of technology, but looking for problems to solve sometimes.
Yeah.
In America, when I studied in MIT, it's opposite. Okay, where are the problems? Let's find a solution. And technology, it doesn't matter which technology, but let's solve it. I think the combination is the right thing, and that's why I think it's the way to go. And it's a team. Every time it's a team. You need to have many PhDs, but you need someone who has a total business understanding and knowledge, and to make it work.
Yeah, I think the ideal is to try to combine the two. In other words, to have somebody who is articulate with the technology and understands the commercial aspects of it. Why? Because in the early days, you have to sell, and to sell, you have to explain the value. And so when you're presented with challenges that require understanding of how your product works or how it is differentiated, if you're not conversant at a very deep level, it can be a hindrance. So you don't want to always carry, like the tech sort of associate to deal with these kinds of questions. But I get it, and it's very important. But thankfully, in many cases in startups, and we've seen it ourselves in, for example, like 𝐼𝐳𝐷𝐷𝐸 comes to mind, which we invested and was sold to Meta, where the two founders were PhDs, the University of Patras, both, very heavily into tech. But as the company grew, one stayed sort of on the CTO role, the other switched to CEO, and he grew personally in wonderful ways to the point where the company grew and was sold. So I think that's an ideal example in one sense, that it's a very close-knit team. They understand the product inside and out, both technically and commercially, and you're not afraid to send this one guy out and have him sell all around. But this is it's a very important point. We see it also with professionals specifically, where there's no visibility into the potential of the commercial aspects of the technology, which can be lethal. Yes.
Great. Oded, we have a question for you, which is in how many years are we going to see fusion power on a bigger scale in our lives?
And cost, and what cost?
And at what cost? Thank you.
First of all, I think this decade we're going to see some amazing breakthroughs. I hope from us, but I believe that the fusion ecosystem now being built, and we're part of the Fusion Industry Association in the US, and we're seeing many startups pushing forward. I think it's going to happen this decade with very interesting solutions. As I said before, we are doing something which is smaller and faster to validate. And I think our very aggressive plan shows something that by the end of this decade, we're going to see something making energy. And hopefully in time to solve some of the large problems of climate change. I'm very hopeful, and I'm very much dedicated to doing this. It's super exciting to wake up in the morning, and that's what you're trying to solve. But it's also very hard work, and you don't know what you don't know, and that's the problem. And when you think you know a lot and you're doing something, you need to plan for the unknown. And I think we have a good ability to do that, and I think other startups are also pushing forward. I think the main ability to push and create a solution like that sooner is a collaboration of government, academia, and collaboration of the private sector, including within the ecosystem. As much as when you increase collaboration cooperation, you increase speed. And I'm looking forward to having that in this fusion ecosystem.
Great. So I want to shift the conversation to funding, and I have a couple of thoughts on that I want to ask you about. But let me just start with you, Bill. What is the business model for what you're doing? Like, you're not the whole organization, but for specifically what you're doing. How do you get funded, and what's the...
So the IFC is owned by 180 countries, including Greece. So we appreciate Greece ownership. And they have contributed approximately 20 billion of equity, which, because governments own us, we're able to leverage up to with a AAA rating quite substantially. So it results in an aggregate asset portfolio of about $200 billion that we're focused on in the profits for a purpose, how we can actually solve development challenges in emerging markets. And so we are long-term permanent capital. We don't have a 10-year fund life, so we can actually hold and have held portfolio company investments for 17, 18 years to work with those founders to expand into new markets and meet new challenges as their business evolves.
So you invest in those companies.
We do.
And then what's your exit strategy?
So our exit strategy is we do want to recirculate capital and recycle, because we want to be able to not just have the same portfolio, but look for the next new thing that's going to have a big impact. And so when a company has reached its development milestones and the marginal development that they're going to get, both from a profit and an impact perspective, are less, that's the time when we exit and then recycle the capital back into something at an earlier stage.
Great. Speaking of milestones, Alex, I am curious for you, when you're looking at investments, how do you think about milestones, particularly in the climate of today, where funding is difficult, and so a startup is going to have to kind of get through that to the next milestone in order to get the next round of funding?
Yeah, I guess milestones, I mean, you start off with a team, then you start with product maturity, meaning having something that works like a demo, then you go to something that has traction, right? And then after you have traction and you have a consistency in the selling, let's say, machinery, then you might go for bigger rounds. But the reality today is true that, we are expecting to see protracted sort of periods for fundraising. So I think the milestones are not different than they were in the past. It's just that, you need to be very solid, that you'll get to the next stage, because, again, things will be difficult for you, fundraising. Having said that, again, I think we're in the business of exceptions. So I don't think we are that much dependent on the macro climate. I mean, we are when we fundraise, let's say, to build the fund, okay? But while we are operating, and I think internally, the funds themselves, I think there is a depression maybe in the valuations, but I think there is money to invest in companies that are very solid, okay? It has to be absolutely solid.
Great.
If I can have a word on that.
Yeah, please.
I think we can also see that in deep tech, understanding the long term of it, I think there is still appetite to invest in these kind of longer term, higher impact companies because of that. And but it's different people probably investing in this than.
So talk about your experience. Where did your funding come from? How patient is it? And what's your next big milestone?
So we have quite a few, but the next big milestone is to present the high energy that is needed and the full confinement. There are 3 parameters in plasma. It's N, T, tau, by the way. N is density, T is temperature, and tau is the time, confinement time. And those 3 parameters need to work together, and you're playing with those knobs. So our major milestone in a couple of years is to show the highest energy that is needed and get to really bring the concept into full working system. I think raising funds. We just closed recently an A round, a very good A round, $22 million. That was
Congratulations.
was closed. We were lucky to have a few good leaders, Delek USA. We had Next Gear Ventures from Israel and their LPs, and also Honda that joined. And that's the first automotive to join the fusion ecosystem in space. And so we're pushing it very strongly together. There's a lot of interest and I think enthusiasm to really help in this. So I agree, there was a downturn. It was tougher a little bit, but still, I think there is still appetite for deep tech, and it's important.
Great. And what do you consider the most challenging part? Like which phase of deep tech development is the most challenging? Is it the early stage, sort of defining the market, prototyping, commercialization?
Yeah, it's holding your stomach when you're investing in a pre-revenue company and the hope that this technical research actually is going to work. That is the hardest thing, particularly with our investment committee, of which I chair, but most people really get nauseous when a business is 2 or 3 years pre-revenue generating.
And at what stage are you typically investing?
So we'll invest in businesses that are kind of 18 months before they generate revenue.
So you're pretty close.
Pretty close, but we tend to shy away if it's 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, we have to say that we appreciate the ability of investors to
to look longer term.
It's important. No, totally.
No, I agree. I think the transformation, from an organization that builds something to an organization that can sell something, it's very difficult and requires not only maturity in the technology, but also in the people and organizationally within the company. I mean, to have a sales team and support, etc. So I think going from zero revenue to getting your first, let's say, 10 customers is instrumental. I mean, that really creates a company. I mean, if you get there, then the rest, can be worked out. But a lot of companies fail to do that transformation effectively and then wither and die. So I think that would be the most dangerous thing. It's like with birth.
Yep.
I mean, gestation is great, birth is the most difficult sort of. And I think the time the product goes to market is sort of similar. I mean, if it goes out and it's nice, everybody's happy. If things go wrong,
otherwise, you're guessing about product market fit. And
yes, exactly. Up to the point is anybody's guess. Then it's reality.
Yeah.
Apart from climate, sustainability, and energy, what are the hardest problems in deep tech in the 10-year horizon? What is the next technology that will change human behavior, just as how computers and smartphones have changed human daily life?
I think you forgot health. I think health tech, a great example is, just thinking about the advances of the COVID vaccines. Who would have thought that Pfizer and BioNTech were struggling to try to figure out RNA, and then they turned to a Tunisian company called InstaDeep, which is a deep AI specialist, to actually solve the problem. And they were able to do that in about a 4-month period. And now BioNTech bought InstaDeep because they saw the value of that deep AI technology for the future of healthcare.
That's fascinating.
So I think the advances, when you think about 2 billion additional people on the planet, of how deep tech and healthcare will change the care model in a way that drives down costs and increases inclusivity and better treatment options is going to be transformed over the next decade.
I think that when I look long term, I think education is extremely important, and I would, after finishing energy, I will go and work on education and the human mind. We have got to create better educational system moving forward in the next decades. We are way back in the way we teach. We remove curiosity, unfortunately, from the young kids in most public educational systems, and we need to work on that to really create the next generation of problem solvers. There are going to be problems to solve always. And we need great minds and great thinkers and outside of the box thinkers. And if we train everyone to be in a box, they can never think out of the box.
So after you lick energy, you're going to move on to education?
Hopefully, in the time span that I can. But I really, really am passionate about education as well. And I think it's super important because looking long term, we have to do that better. I think MIT is a great place that does that.
It does.
But it does it on a higher level. We need to start very early.
Totally agree.
Look, I think the healthcare, by the way, is huge. And in fact, I was surprised to see in our own portfolio at BigPie that it represents a very large part of it. More than 40% is health-related investment. So there's a lot of innovation. Digital technology definitely transforms it in many, many ways. Diagnostics, I mean, in many, many ways. And also, obviously, with AI, what we're experiencing now with ChatGPT, we have a company called Alter in the UK that basically processes voice and can make your voice sound like anybody else, presumably somebody talented. And so we're experiencing all that, and we're wondering where this will all lead. And my thoughts is that we are very busy building technological tools, but we haven't addressed at all how we use them and how we incorporate them in our daily lives, right? So as we go through our careers, we don't have a course on, okay, how are you supposed to use all these tools? You personally, how do you organize your digital life? Right? Where you keep your notes, where you keep your files, how many times you see something on TV. So we left that completely open. Everybody sort of does it on their own. It relates to education as well, because you have 24 hours, you have to select what you will do with them. So I think that part, our interaction with all that technology, which becomes more and more affordable, we haven't really addressed it as a society, okay? And has already created a lot of problems, and will keep creating problems as technology creation accelerates and adoption accelerates. And you see that there was a call for stopping AI development for 6 months. I don't know if you read about it. Okay, many, very well-known people asked to say, let's stop for 6 months to figure out where all this is going, which is, personally, I think it's cannot happen, okay? But I think it's a sign that people started thinking, wait a second, do we know how we're handling this as a society? So I think that will definitely become a key issue, especially as the population will keep growing. And the plan is not.
Bill and Alex, what are you looking for in terms of metrics when you're looking at a startup, a deep tech startup, and assessing it?
First, the quality of the intellectual property. That's the number one. The second is an application of that intellectual property to a commercial application in emerging markets that solves one of the UN's SDGs. At the same time, by solving that,
What's an SDG?
Strategic development goals.
Okay.
So solving poverty, increasing healthcare, increasing education, increasing gender diversity. There's a whole host of things that we focus on. And so if those things are lined up and that you're seeing the KPIs on the technology developing in kind of concert with, during our diligence process with what the management team had told us would happen, that gets us comfort to pull the trigger and invest.
Yeah. But along the same lines, we look at the technology first. It has to be strong. We have to look at the market. It has to be a big enough market that the company can get in and basically survive. And of course, the team has to be able to service both the technology and the market. There has to be complementarity, capability. And we also, I think, we'll discuss this yesterday as well, it's not only important where the team is professionally at that particular point in time, but also what is the derivative, their trajectory in their careers. So we look at people who are sort of building up to that moment where they're creating the company moving forward. It gives you a sense of comfort to know there is momentum in what they're doing, okay? So it has to make sense, in other words, for them also professionally. But certainly, we'll start technology, market, then the team.
Along those lines of momentum, one thing I've seen in Greece with startups is you see some that have been around for a really long time, like 10 or 20 years, and they're maybe at like $1 million in revenues, that kind of thing. What's your reaction to that? Is that a deal breaker, just that they haven't gotten kind of broken through?
It's not a good sign.
Yeah.
It's not a good sign. Because, and you have to look at why this is the case. Is it because the product is formulated in a way that cannot grow? Is it that maybe the team is not ambitious enough? They weren't willing to take capital, let's say, to expand to other markets. They're happy to have some revenue, like local or like, sort of regional revenue. And they're happy, they're making, 10 million, they have profit of 2 and everybody's happy. So you have to look at the details. But generally, it's not a good sign, I think, for us, if a company has not made any sort of changes for a very long period of time.
So let's see. What role does globalization play in de-risking and commercializing deep tech?
Well, I think I used the analogy of Boston Metal
Yeah.
needing an emerging market, Brazil, because of its renewable power, to actually commercialize its first plant. And when I think of deep tech solutions, they are solving big challenges that aren't local, they're global. And so historically, in a lot of tech coming from Europe, including Greece, the business model was always, let's think about moving west, Europe and the US, in terms of commercialization. But in some of these deep tech solutions, the right opportunity may be moving south, Africa. It may be moving southeast to South Asia for the application. So keeping an open mind to where the best place to actually launch that deep tech solution, where regulatory environments are a little more flexible than they are necessarily in Europe or the US, to speed up market adoption can make a lot of sense for many deep tech companies.
And so when you're looking at market potential, are you thinking about impact potentially, let's say going into Africa first, where you're going to have a huge impact without the financial benefits, and then going, let's say, to Europe, where then you can get the profits?
It's exactly what we think.
That makes a lot of sense. So any other thoughts on globalization?
Look, from one thing, it's fantastic because we have companies, for example, our portfolio, Balena, is fully distributed. They hire people, they don't care where they are. And the company has been set up so that they can operate in this fully distributed fashion. That's one extreme. Others, we have a company called Orpheum, where there's a very small team in LA and a huge development team in Greece, 200 people, and 25 in LA. And the numbers are probably wrong because the guys are growing. So that would be unheard of, let's say, 10 years ago, to have a globally relevant company. Okay, I mean, they're a leader in the space. Okay, they collect royalties for rights owners from YouTube. So it's a global leader that decides to put a team here. And in fact, they were so happy with it that the finance director moved from an American, he moved from the US to Greece. So that's all possible because through globalization, you can do that. You can run, let's say, your personal life from wherever you are in the world, okay? So both at the personal level for the organizations, for companies, but also for the markets themselves. We have companies in Greece, they don't sell in Greece, they sell, to Brazil, to the US, etc. And it's definitely possible, so that's great.
I think I agree, but I would also add maybe another point on the globalization issue is on the technology. Eventually, for deep tech, you need technology, and globalization helps in finding the right parts or the right components and the right partners to really push forward and maybe accelerate and do that. And I think that's a huge part before you go to market, before you can work. And I think a global kind of ecosystem around these kind of deep tech in different spaces can really push forward and enable. But we need to be open. We need to want to collaborate and cooperate, and that's a human issue, and that's part of it. But I think we're moving there, and I think necessity creates that kind of process. So I think it's great, and it's inherent character of what's happening this last decade. But I think, and hopefully, it will continue.
Well, one thing we're seeing in Greece, and I'd love you both to speak to this, is the adoption of the Israeli model in Greece, where you have the market-facing established in the U.S., just like you were talking with Orpheum, and then keep a development team in Greece. So I'd love you both to talk about how that works and what are the advantages and disadvantages.
Look, for us, it's a key aspect of the way we operate and something that our portfolio companies sort of enjoy. So the idea is that here in Greece, you have very highly educated people. So you have a great sort of workforce. The compensation is not as high as it would be in the major centers, in the US or the UK. And in addition, people here tend to not to change jobs as often as they would, let's say, in the US. So there is commitment in what they do, especially important for deep tech, because after you build expertise, the last thing you want to have, your lead designer sort of to go to some other company. So I think that works well. So for people, we invest in companies where typically there's a Greek connection. One of the co-founders will be Greek. So they do want to connect with Greece for personal reasons, but also they can understand and appreciate those benefits, okay? So I think in our portfolio, this has been a very strong component of the value proposition of why should somebody, get money from 𝐵igPie and set up shop in Greece, okay? So I think it's a very good model.
I think the model in Israel works. And the model in Israel is for many years has been, we are deep in the tech, we understand the technology, we're looking for the market, and the market was usually the West. So usually US, Europe, but I think we see a change. And we see a change also with the Abraham Accords into the Middle East and also further Southeast Asia and the other parts of the world. And I think it's good that we're opening up because the big challenges are out there. And still, the financing is still in the West stronger. But in that sense, the model that has been created in Israel is based on knowledge from the army that everybody needs to go to. And then you create a lot of knowledge and people that can do the stuff and solve the problems, and then from that you continue, and government is helping, and so the combination, as I said, I think is extremely important.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of model can be built in other places, and should be, and it will progress. And I think Greece has a good chance to push this well forward.
Bill, do you see it in other places?
I do. I mean, a good example is Eastern Europe. Even Ukraine today, even with the Russian invasion, there's a lot of interesting, highly skilled tech talent in Ukraine, still living and working in Kiev, developing technology solutions in SaaS that are, going global, even today.
Amazing.
So I see the model that Greece is starting to adopt is one that can be replicated in a lot of countries that are smaller in terms of size and population, but have really robust intellectual capacity and horsepower. And I think Greece fits that, and I'm proud of the progress they've made on entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's great. So we have a question from the audience. How do you validate a deep tech startup? What's the expected timeline, and what's the checklist, the due diligence checklist? I guess we'll start with you, Alex.
Oh my God! Yes. Well, it's very particularly the technology you are evaluating. Okay, so obviously we have some understanding for several types of technologies, but we cannot be experts on everything. So there is a lot of work that you have to do to really dig deep. So, you bring in your understanding of several things, and then you need assistance from others, colleagues, or associates from industry, etc., when you're presented with a particular technological innovation. So there is a lot of work to really get a handle on okay, is the IP, important enough? Is the patent strong enough? I mean, all these things are very...
So do you get outside experts?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's, again... I think in all cases, I cannot think of something that would not require outside expertise. And also there is a lot of challenges on also how you market the particular technology. In other words, each technology space has its own way of how the product is developed and then sold. Do you sell directly? Do you sell through somebody who has the integration? So all these are very important details. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to figure out, okay? So and it's very specific to the industry. So after you get the comfort feeling, then you start looking at the team, etc. I wouldn't say there is a particular checklist per se. I mean, we do have our own sort of review, if you wish, guidelines that we essentially create, an investment memo, right? That tries to address a bunch of questions. So if that would be called a recipe, that would be the recipe. But again, there is so much detail on the specific, let's say, product that somebody is building on the specific industry that, each journey, if you wish, is very unique. Yeah.
So very similar. So when we're looking at the space, we do a psychological profile of the CEO and the management team to really understand how well they're going to work together and whether the skills are complementary or not. We hire third-party. We have an internal deep tech expert that then contracts with third-party consultants, typically PhDs in specific spaces, to understand the diligence. In the case of something like Boston Metal, we also have relationships with all emerging market steel manufacturers. And so we went to those manufacturers and said, would you adopt this technology? And if so, what would you need to be able to take it on in all of your manufacturing facilities globally? So we understood the product market fit was going to be on the customer side to license the technology. And then with that review of IP and then a focus on all the things that can go wrong, which is what our investment committee focuses on, not all the things that can go right, is how we ended up getting comfortable.
Great. Do you have something?
Yeah, I felt it on my flesh. So we went through very hard due diligence. And I think I wouldn't expect anyone to invest in any deep tech, especially fusion, without really bringing experts to test it and to study and check the team, obviously, but also the issue itself and the solution. So I think we felt it a lot during the last process. No, it's a long process. It's like over a year. Yeah. It's a long process, but it teaches you a lot, and also you are able to present what you have, and that's very important. And you cannot go into deep tech without doing some thorough checking.
Did you find, I was struck in the early days of how much I learned from the investors in terms of strategic thinking in the very early days. And I'm curious if you had that experience.
Of the investors, the strategic?
Just like having insightful questions from the investors.
Oh yeah, definitely. And some things that they opened up thinking in what the market should look like. What is the best market fit in different aspects, but also, do you choose the right milestones? Do you have the right people? And they very much focus on team. Do you have the right team? I put a lot of money on you. I'll put even more.
Yeah.
Do you have the right people to really do it? And it's a lot of de-risking thinking and questioning. And that was excellent process.
Yeah, that's great. So all three of you, do you think it's possible to do a lean deep tech startup? I have to tell you, I'm very biased on this.
I think the answer is yes. I mean, I gave you UiPath. I gave you UiPath as an example. I mean, from 2005 to 2013, $300,000. The team working out of an apartment, and then they ended up with the product. Then they raised a ton of money, but for a long period, they operated on $300,000. Amazing. We backed a deep tech startup in Ethiopia, a woman founder. Early stage, we gave her $10,000. That allows her to have a team for 3 years.
Wow. Incredible.
So we'll see if she's successful.
I think, we're trying to prove that it's possible, but I think we're proving it already. I think the linear you are, the faster you work, the quicker you can make processes done in some aspects. And then you need to grow the team, in my mind, as slowly as possible, the slowest possible that will really bring you to the next milestone without putting too many people and lose time on the process. And we've been doing this with shoestring kind of working in the previous process, and now we're pushing further. And I think when you're still small, you can very much focus the team and work and solve the big issues before you create the next process. I think it's not only doable, it's a must.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, I tend to remind founders when they close rounds that this is not a moment of success. Now, getting the money is not the successful moment. It's a great milestone because you have fuel to continue the journey, right? But you have to, realize what the end goal is. But we've seen a lot of companies that are extremely lean and, people working with very little resources for a long time. And I think it also shows that these guys who are committed and tenacious, in the end, they manage to succeed. Because even after they get their funding, there'll still be 1,000 problems. If you get into that mentality of problem solving and doing more with what you have, then that's going to lead to success.
Great. So in closing, and you guys can see the clock, so divide your time equally. I would like you to speak to a researcher who has a great technology, they want to commercialize it, and they just don't know how do you get started? Like, what's next? Let's say they're getting their PhD and they have something really, really gold in their hands.
Well, I think a program like what France does is great, where it takes those academic researchers and pairs them with someone from HEC Business School, so that they have that business school mindset along with the research PhD candidate, and work together as a team to actually come up with a formidable business plan. And so I would encourage those researchers to think about finding a partner that brings that skill set.
I will be very quick. You found your passion. You think you have even the technology. Create the strong team, all passionate about the same thing. You'll have enough energy to push forward and create it.
Okay, so for a professor, what I would say is see if you want to just license it. If you truly want to make a company, see if you want to be the leader. If not, see if one of your team members can be the leader. If not, find another one that cannot find the leader. If you cannot find somebody that can believe your vision, you shouldn't be doing this job. So don't even start.
Great. Well, thank you all. I really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you very much.